Good evening and welcome. We are delighted tonight to be joined by legal academic Conor Hanley. We're going to be having a chat about a little bit about Conor and about the law and where we are at the moment regarding certain subjects that may be close to our viewers' hearts and where we and what the future may look like. Conor, you were saying just before we came on air, you were not a native-born Irishman.
I'm not, in fact. No, my parents are both from Clare. My father's from Clarecastle and my mother's from Ennis. But as was not terribly unusual, they both emigrated to England and met up again. They got married. They had us while they were over there, and we came back in 1980 when I was 12 years old.
12. So you quite a sizable chunk of your childhood you spent in England.
Yes.
You said us. There was more than you.
I have a brother and a sister. My sister stayed in England because she was in college at that point. Right. So my mother, father, and brother and myself came back.
Very good. So, what kind of family was it? What was it like to grow up in the Hanley house?
I'm not sure exactly how to answer that.
Well, we as children, I think we always assume our family is the standard.
Yes.
And other people occasionally discover do slightly odd things.
Yes.
And then years later think, oh,
yeah,
actually we were. So were you like bookish family, a scholarly family, a religious family?
Yes to both. Both my parents were practicing Catholics, and they raised all of us in the faith as well. They also had a tremendous value and respect for education. My mother was a state registered nurse and midwife, and my father was a certified accountant. So they insisted on us, obviously going to school, doing well in school, getting good grades. There was never a doubt that we'd go into college, and we all did. My sister is a barrister. My brother is an art historian, and I'm a legal academic.
So, you're 12. Are you going to a Catholic school in England?
No, it was a state school. State school, yes. In Heathrow, in fact. I got to see Concorde take off on its maiden flight from school. We all trooped out, watched this thing fly off, and then trooped back in again.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So you're over in West London.
Yeah.
Near Ealing, Hounslow, that's it.
Yes.
So a pretty Irish, a lot of Irish people around.
There were. My parents had they didn't really push the Irish thing. They were Irish and very proud of being Irish. My father has a long connection with the GAA. Some of the people here might well know my uncle John Henley, well-known character in Clarecastle and Clare GAA circles. But while we were in England, we didn't go to Irish dancing, or we didn't learn Irish. Things like that. I was involved in the Scouts and the Boys Brigade and camping and getting up to mischief as young lads do.
But nothing. It wasn't sort of Gaelic with a capital G kind of thing.
No. But proud of being Irish in the background, and we came home 4 or 5 times every year.
So you're 12. You come back to Clare?
Yes, to Ennis.
To Ennis, and you start. You go to school here. You go to in Flannans.
Flannans. I'm a Flannans man. Yes. I came back. I'd done first year of secondary school in England, so I came back and went straight into second year here.
So you arrive in Flannans, and you have to understand that a hurl is not just a weapon.
Well, debatable at times, but yes, and I started playing hurling. Of course, I'd missed out on years and years of formative experience and practice. But my father was big into hurling, and he was delighted when I picked up the hurley. And I played hurling for the Banner GAA club, and claim to fame. I played for Clare in the under 16 level, and didn't get anywhere. Got destroyed in the first round by East Limerick, but there you go. And I was due to start playing for Flannans. I'd been selected for a team and got my kneecap broken, and that put an end to my Flannans hurling career.
Just the kneecap broken. That sounds pretty.
It was about as bad as it sounds. It wasn't fun. It was my leaving cert year. As it turns out,
you must have been fairly good because Flannans was considered to be one of the great.
It was. Well, I was big. I was big, and I could throw a shoulder fairly well, but I wasn't the most skillful player that ever lived. But yeah, it was actually in a selection match, and I was told afterwards I'd made the selection panel, but because my knee was gone, I spent most of the year on crutches, which actually turned out to be a good thing because it was my leaving cert year. I couldn't get up to Divilment, so I had to study.
Now, you mentioned your sister's a barrister?
Yes, she is.
You're a legal academic. So, when did you think to yourself, law, that's what I want to do? Barrister also, I mean, arguing for a living, legal academic, a little bit. Was it a house where you had vigorous debates at the table, or?
We had some. I had never intended to be a lawyer. I'd never intended to follow the law route. I had always intended to be a soldier.
Okay.
The military career. I wanted a cadetship. Which I actually got. I got an Air Corps cadetship, but
it's a rare thing.
It is a rare thing, and I was delighted with myself. I finished my primary degree at NUI Galway at the time. Went in. I was actually in the process of my LLB law degree. I had to come out and go up to the Curragh, begin training, but my knee came at me. Because I injured it again just before I went in, and turns out I couldn't run. And it's kind of bad to be in military training if you can't run. So
in fairness, now you're mostly flying.
Well, yeah, you kind of have to run before you fly.
Well,
so
yeah. Okay.
So I made the very difficult decision to leave and went back to college and completed my law degree. So
what did you do at undergraduate level?
It was a BA degree
in law.
In law and history.
Okay.
Law and history.
It's an interesting combo.
It is, and actually a much better combo than I realised at the time, because of course our legal system works through a system of historical precedent. So understanding how history works actually helps you understand how the law works.
So you go back, you do your LLB in
Galway.
In Galway,
Yeah.
right? And at this stage, you're getting a sense that this is something you really enjoy.
Oh God, no! Oh no? God, no! I completed my law degree and I realised I didn't want to go near the law ever again.
Right.
No. I'm telling you, all of this is entirely by accident. I fell into this. There was no plan at all. My whole plan had been directed towards the army, and that was gone. So I was trying to find my feet again. And so I graduated with my LLB. My first job was in an insurance company up in Dublin, in the claims department, which was a litigation environment, and that sort of rekindled my interest in the law. And from there I did a research master's degree at UCD at night, so maintaining my job during the day, and that rekindled my interest in studying law.
Now, at any stage did you go to Blackhall? Did you?
No.
You didn't do the professional exam?
No, I didn't. At the time, I had a very muddled picture of what I wanted to do. I was in Dublin, so of course that was the ideal time to go to the bar or to Blackhall Place, but I didn't. So I sort of went the academic route, not really understanding where that might take me. Again, as I say, I had no plan here.
So you did a master's at night?
Yes, I did.
And you were doing, that was the master's by research?
By research, I mean by thesis, yes.
And you're working at the same time?
Yes.
That must have been fairly busy.
Oh yeah. All my holidays and weekends went on it, and my girlfriend at the time, God bless her, she was an absolute angel. Yeah. I probably didn't tell her that often enough, but yeah, it was hard going. But when you're young, you can do these things.
I vaguely remember.
Yes, indeed.
So you finished the masters. Yeah. Then what?
Continued working in the insurance company until they offered a voluntary redundancy, which I took, and I got my first academic position in Waterford Institute of Technology. I started late, and they needed somebody quickly. They needed somebody to teach criminal law quickly. I hadn't seen criminal law in years at that point, but they said, you're the new guy, off you go, start teaching.
What did you do your masters in?
My master's was actually a study of price competition.
Oh.
Because at the time I had visions of being some kind of corporate counsel.
Price, which would be the Chicago School had done a lot of that.
Absolutely.
Price competition and monopolies and that kind
all of that sort of stuff, yeah. All of that's microeconomics stuff. Yeah. It actually was. And it covered a lot of ground, both law and economics. I had to learn a lot of economics. It was never my strongest subject at school.
But then you're in Waterford and you're teaching
I was
criminal
teaching
law.
16 hours across 5 different subjects, primarily criminal law. I did a bit of constitution law, a bit of contract law. I taught law to social care workers. Basically, whatever was required. It was, as I say, 16 hours of teaching across 5 different subjects.
And then Yale.
Yeah.
How does Yale happen? I mean, that's...
Well, I was in WIT for 5 years, and then I got a job in NUI Galway, or
Right.
UCG. I think it was UCG at the time, since NUI Galway. I started there in 2000, and it was great to come home. I was able to come back home. My father had just died at that point, so my mother was on her own. So it was handy both for me and for her. And I started at NUIG, and in 2003 I sought and was granted a sabbatical, an early sabbatical, to study in the United States.
Was this with the intention of doing a doctorate? Or
Yes, yes, it was. All of my education to that point had been in Ireland. My third level education had been in Ireland. Very foolishly, I didn't take the Erasmus opportunities that existed. I still regret that. So this was sort of a second chance. I got to go to the US.
You've been in 5 years in WIT.
Yes.
Then you're in NUIG, or UCG as it used to be. Are you enmeshed now in the criminal law? Is that what?
Yes, yes, I am.
This is the direction you're going in.
At this point, I'm enmeshed in the criminal law. I've written a textbook on criminal law, published some articles in criminal law. I'm involved in various organisations, particularly in the area of sexual and domestic violence. I'm helping them.
And what was it, the criminal as opposed to the civil, as opposed to what constitutional, that attracted you?
Well, initially it was because they needed WIT needed somebody to teach criminal. So, but criminal, most students in law schools enjoy criminal law because it's inherently fascinating. You see it every day in the newspapers and the television, and you know it's just something that students typically pick up on, and I was the same. Having now come at it from the other side, from teaching it, it really is an inherently fascinating subject. It's a terrible subject in many ways, because, well, you're not dealing with kittens and puppies. You're dealing with some really nasty stuff, and especially in the area of sexual crime, really difficult stuff. No, and yet it's also important in that it sort of establishes the baseline of our society.
Yeah.
We need to get this right.
The thing about criminal, if you're criminal law is your particular interest, you're in a slightly unusual position. You're teaching students who, if they are particularly interested in criminal law, the chances are they're going to practice either as barristers or solicitors in criminal law, which means litigation, the court system, and yet you're outside the court.
Yes.
Have you ever that temptation?
Oh,
to put on the wig and go in and argue in front.
Yes, of course, of course. To an extent, I've sort of made my bed. It's an academic bed, and it's a comfortable bed, and I like my bed. That's grand. But there's always a part of me that you look at the barristers, and they're at the cold face, in all its glory. But there are practicalities. Studying at the bar would require 2 years part-time, up and down to Dublin. I'd pretty much have to end all my research plans, which would have a serious effect on my academic career. So really, I'm not sure how much of a flyer it is at the moment. That may change.
But I know the systems are being reformed now, that solicitors increasingly can practice in front of the bar, and that's to quite a high level.
Yes, they can.
And now will be considered for judgeships.
Yes, all the way up. Yeah,
all the way up. So, anyway, so you decided, okay, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do, and now you have an opportunity to go to Yale, one of the world's great law schools.
It is. Yeah.
You go to Yale, and to study. What was the area that you wanted to research?
Well, Yale, like a lot of American law schools, will very rarely take people directly into their doctoral program. Right. So I went over first for a taught master's degree, a second master's degree, and I had to take a series of subjects, a very wide subjects. Yale has an enormous faculty for its size. It's quite a small law school, but there's a lot of faculty members there. So I tended to, most of my subjects were in the area of criminal law and legal history. I did a lot of legal history. In particular, took modules with the professor who became my doctoral supervisor, John Langpine. The history of the criminal trial, essentially. So those were the kind of areas I'm building up, trying to build up my understanding of the criminal law, both contemporary and historical.
You're in this great institution of northeastern Yankee liberalism.
Yes, yes.
You're coming from a background of a person of faith. Would you describe yourself as conservative?
Yes, I would. Yes.
Socially conservative?
Yes.
So what's it like to be a person of faith, socially conservative, in the law department in Yale?
Yale is an interesting place, as indeed is the northeast of the United States. On the one hand, it is a very liberal place. It's they would say very left-wing, we would say very liberal. They tend to conflate those two ideas. And yet there's also a very strong emphasis on personal responsibility. There's a strong emphasis also on faith itself. The university is a private organization, unlike here, where most universities are public. It's private, but there's a very strong Catholic centre there, named after St. Thomas More. There's a lot of practicing Catholics who Sunday Mass was full every week. Very strong emphasis on charity work and contribution to community. So in that respect, there's absolutely no difficulty. There's absolutely no barrier.
Now what dates are you talking about?
2003, 2004 initially,
right.
And then I went back again in 2009 to 2012 to finish my doctorate.
You're in that period just immediately post-millennium. When I remember there was a very famous front page, I think it was Time, where around it would have been in that, which was anti-Catholicism, the last acceptable prejudice in the United States. You're saying obviously there were great opportunities to perfectly fine to be Catholic. Did you get a sense of that other side?
No, I didn't. Honestly, I didn't, and I think people certainly in that area would pride themselves on just how open and tolerant they are. I never once came across any difficulty. The only occasion, and it wasn't a difficulty at all, it was Ash Wednesday. I got the ashes, and I walked into a shop to buy some milk. And the shopkeeper was of Indian extraction, and he asked, did you fall and bang your head? Because he didn't know what the ashes were, and I just explained it, and he said, oh, that's great, and took my money, and off I went. There was never an issue. There was never an issue. The US also has a very strong tradition of protecting free speech, especially speech directed at political issues. As a private organization, Yale, it's not a state organization, and the First Amendment is a lot stronger as regards the state. But Yale itself also has a long tradition of free speech. And in fact, in the law school, a former dean by the name of Guido Calabresi had established a tradition that he called the wall. And it's one of the walls in the law school. And any student could post anything on that wall, anything they wanted about any subject, no matter how provocative, providing they signed it.
Okay.
No anonymity. If you say something, you're expected to stand over it. And it was a place of debate and discussion. And Yale University does have a Federalist Society branch, which would be quite conservative. There are Yale Law Republicans. One day, I remember it was after George Bush had signed some piece of legislation on education, No Child Left Behind. We came in the morning, and the Yale Law Republicans had plastered the wall with all kinds of Republican sentiment. And there was a lot of disquiet from Yale Democrats, but it was there. Nobody interfered with it, and they started writing up counter arguments, which was wonderful. It's exactly what a university should be.
That's what they should be.
Exactly.
Now, so you come back in 2010.
2009.
You finish your doctorate
in 2012.
In 2012.
Yeah.
And then back to Ireland.
And then back to Galway. Yeah.
Now, one of the things if you're like me and you're fascinated by anything to do with law and lawyers, whether it's John Grisham or the Supreme Court, I don't care. I'll watch any of it.
Yeah.
We're very aware of the politicized nature of the law in the United States. And we're very aware, for example, that Yale, for example, will have work within a certain legal tradition, or Harvard. But then there are going to be other universities, like if you want, you can go to that maybe maybe have a more conservative tradition. Chicago certainly would have
in some respects,
in some respects, would have a different tradition. Certainly with the economics, the behavioural economics, that kind of thing. We have no sense of that in Ireland.
No.
Are we naive? Are we innocent?
No, I don't think we are. We have different traditions, and let me say this about the U.S. We shouldn't overstate the degree of politicization in the U.S. When we talk about that, we tend to be looking at it from the perspective of cases usually before the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Most American litigation is quite like ours. The vast majority of litigation has nothing to do with law. It has to do with factual disputes.
Sure.
So we're talking in the first place about a small subset of litigation. And then of that small subset, an even smaller subset will reach the rarefied atmosphere of the appellate courts at federal level. And an even smaller subset will get to the Supreme Court. And it's really at that level that this politicization starts really playing out. So we shouldn't overstate that. Most of American law and American litigation would be fairly similar to ours, and would be resolved in much the same way through negotiated settlements on the civil side and through guilty pleas and plea bargains on the criminal side. That said, at that level, yes, it is very politicized. And I remember at Yale attending a talk given by two federal appellate judges, one of whom I didn't know. He was brought in. One I did know very well, and I have enormous respect for. And both of them spoke quite openly about our judges and their judges, meaning liberal and conservative judges. And I was aghast at that, as were all of the other foreign law students there who were made up the LLM year. Absolutely aghast at this. That it has got to the point where it's almost now a lottery. Who will be on the bench, who will die. I've been noticed on my own Facebook feed a lot of memes about Ruth Bader Ginsburg when she had a fall recently. Yes. Absolute terror among liberals that she might die, because of course Donald Trump is in the White House.
On the court.
Exactly, and that's a crazy way to run a judiciary. It is of course true that the judiciary everywhere is made up of very bright, intelligent, educated people. Of course they have opinions. They have worldviews and political philosophies. Of course they do.
But once upon a time it would have been said that if you went to the law library, I'd say the 60s or 70s, the law library was basically the Fine Gael party at work. You get the odd Labour dude and the odd Fianna Fáil would get in, but it was basically the Fine Gael party at work, and that changed. And if you in the 90s, that a lot more of the senior advocates were coming from a Labour Party background, and also the Labour Party seemed to have more interest in getting attorney generalships and getting judges. They're coming from a particular place. What I suppose I'm asking is, our constitution is a different kind of a document.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Certainly. Yes, it is.
And everything about it is different. Like you're talking about judges coming and talking in that way. How many people do we know would know the name of a judge, let alone have a judge coming on here to talk on television or be interviewed about his opinions? It just sounds weird.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And the judges quite rightly are very circumspect about doing that, because they're aware that cases are going to come up before them, and they cannot be prejudiced or be seen to be prejudiced. And perception is very important in this as well.
But do you not feel that there is a change in jurisprudence going on?
There are always changes in jurisprudence, and you can track it. So back in the 1930s and 40s, there was a heavy emphasis on what we call positive law, a rejection of natural law.
That was the English tradition.
Well, exactly. They maintained the English tradition that a statute that had been passed through all of the proper constitutional channels was a statute and should be given effect. That is the judge's role.
Yeah.
There was a very strong dissent from the then Chief Justice, but it was a dissent. That began to change from the late 1960s, particularly with Brian Walsh on the Supreme Court, and natural law came to prominence. The old Chief Justice's dissent was picked up, and that became the new trend. That continued until the mid-1990s with the Abortion Information Bill reference case, and suddenly natural law fell out of favour again. So there are changes in the courts. Sometimes courts are more activist, sometimes they're more restrained. There are differences. Judges are people. They have opinions, as I said, but they also have temperaments, and that will change. And also the mix on the court can change the court as well.
This is just your own personal opinion, but I know that amongst some religious people and certainly conservatives, there's been a lot of discussion recently about the prologue.
The preamble of the preamble, yes.
The prologue. The preamble.
Yeah.
And saying that, you know what, maybe it's time to get rid of the preamble, that it no longer reflects society, and it's almost offensive. But then there's the other argument, you know what, if we keep changing things every time something changes in society, we never have any rooted traditions.
Yeah, a constitution by definition is supposed to be a conservative document.
Yes.
It's supposed to provide stability.
Yes.
If it's changing every day, the nature of the state is changing every day, nobody can get anything done. It is a 1937 document. It was written by people in 1937 with the views of 1937, so it's not surprising that there's a tension.
Liberal friends of mine sometimes say, you want to treat it like a dead document. And I say, yes, I do. I really, really do. You say dead like it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
The purpose of a constitution is to say, stop, slow down, go easy, let's see what you're doing now.
Yes, well, I mean...
And then to provide, obviously, guarantees, and our higher and aspirational guarantees as well.
There are a number of approaches to constitutional interpretation. That's one of them. Textualism, originalism, however you want to phrase it. There is, of course, the tradition of the living document tradition in which words and phrases will have updated meanings. And, you know, there's something to be said for that as well. Personally, I'm not enamored of activism. I prefer to see the courts as adjudicative bodies. They, of course, have to engage in interpretation and give life to what is there.
The problem is the more active it is, the less predictable in its sense it is. And it's always struck me that for justice to prevail, the law must be predictable. Well, it must have a sense that we know when we're breaking the law.
Yes,
or not.
Yes, but it can be argued equally that justice also requires that change should be made when change is required.
Of course.
So there's constant tension. You know, people tend to view the law as very much like akin to a soccer referee with the red card and the yellow card, and it's just rules and, you know, offside and you're off the field, and there's an element of that. There's an element of that.
One of the things that's very...
Sorry, just to finish that thought, but it's a lot more than that as well. There is inherent tension.
Right.
Inherent tension in our constitution, in our law, among the judiciary. It's not monolithic. And it can live, it can breathe, it can make mistakes, it can get things wrong, it can do wonderful things, it can do terrible things. A lot of that comes down to the people within the system and the people who make use of the system.
We're facing, we'll finish up on this.
We could keep going like this all night,
I'm going to tell you something when I see, which is probably not more than unfair, but anyway, what the hell. We're in the context of the changes that have happened in the last number of years in the Constitution. We're moving from one dispensation to another, and people who once would have been the censors are now perhaps worried they are going to be the censored. Say, for example, how do you see this? Say for the right to protest, do you see an easy route for the safe zone, or do you think that the rights to protest, the right to assembly in the Constitution is going to be protected?
Well, we need to keep in mind that pretty much all of the personal rights protected in the Constitution are couched. We were talking about this earlier. They're couched in such a way that there's actually a lot of wiggle room for the state. Some public order, morality, the common good, and things like that. So even though our Constitution does protect the right of assembly and it protects the right of free speech, it doesn't do so absolutely. These are not absolutes. So there is some wiggle room there. I hate to say it, but I think free speech is very much on the back burner. It's very much on the back foot. I regret that enormously, because I think both the law and the polity in general need free speech. They need the marketplace of ideas, where ideas are in constant conflict and being tested. John Stuart Mill, a great liberal writer, back in his book on liberty, wrote that a person who has not had his ideas tested doesn't really understand his own ideas, because they haven't been put through the mill, they haven't been faced in battle. It's very easy to have an idea when you're not testing that idea and testing it for real. And it's for that reason I think my view is that free speech is an essential element of our constitution and of our country and of our polity.
A very high undervalue.
I think it is very undervalued. There is a movement now towards inclusion, which is wonderful. The recognition of diversity, that's wonderful as well. But sometimes offence is part of a society's growing. And what constitutes an offence is going to be different to you, to me, and to everybody else. If that's going to be our dividing line, then nobody will ever say anything, and we're back to puppies and kittens all the time.
And on puppies and kittens, I think we'll say goodbye. And I'd like to thank Conor for a fascinating conversation. I think maybe we'll come back and have another one later on in the year.
I'd be very happy to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.